Okay.
We'll save the maniacal laughter of how we got into the show. Good morning,
Sorry.
afternoon, evening, everyone. It's all right. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso, and you can find all of this at tgtmedia.com. We are joined today by two very creative people on this on the Irony podcast, as I'm going to call this particular episode. We're joined today by Austin Hamblin and, of course, Johannes Vick from the very new comic that is on Kickstarter right now called Steel Wool. How are you guys doing today?
Awesome.
Great to kill.
Great. It's like testicle, but great. For those that don't know, we've had an interesting green room to start off the show here as we were working on technical issues, but that's beside the point because, you know, I've had Austin on the show before. I've never had Johannes, but he's going to have a fun time, I'm sure, dealing with us crazy guys in general. But Austin, talk about the last time you were on the show, we were talking about your other comic, Memory of a Goldfish. Which one?
The Adventures of Punk and Rock.
That's it, exactly. Thank
Yes.
you. The Amazing Adventures of Punk and Rock, which will be the sequel. Since then, though, what have you been up to?
Well, as far as like personal life goes, I bought a house.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I bought a house. The irony being, God, once again, irony.
And
And
you put your big boy pants on?
that's part of it. No, it's the same street, 4 blocks up the road, same side of the street as my parents. Not intentional, mind you, but my dad plows the snow out of my driveway. So
You can't beat that, though.
no,
Wish
You
somebody
gotta-
would plow my snow.
Oh, jeez.
It came out weird.
oh yeah.
So much for that clean podcast tag I have.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Uh,
But, oh, Jesus.
Right out the gate, I messed up. I'm so sorry. Can't be trusted.
It's okay. For those that are listening and watching this, it's going to be an interesting show, just to let you know. We've already started off, and we're not even 2 minutes in. That's great to go on. Oh, excuse me. So you moved 4 blocks away from your folks so that you can still visit for dinner and laundry and all that stuff.
oh, you believe me? That's the eating place, man. I know what time they eat. And I told my dad that. My mom works 3rd shift, so I'm like, I'm gonna just come grocery shopping when Dad's asleep. You know, just walk in and grab stuff and do it. I mean, yeah, you know, it was kind of weird because like the house had everything that I was looking for, and it was the right price.
Nice.
And it was just like so weird that this is where it was at. So you know, say what you will. I love my mommy.
And that's wonderful to hear. And I'm sure everyone would love to live close to their folks, even though I'm across the street from them. But that's beside the point. Anyhow, Johannes, you know, I've never had you on the show here, but talk about how you got started in the industry, and then we'll talk about how you two met. A long walk on the beach and probably some wine, but I mean that's beside.
Let's see. A couple of years ago, well, I've always wanted to be in the industry, and it's something that I wound up in the construction industry for years because it was kind of like just the family thing. They're like, oh, you do art? Well, you can do art here and make stuff. And I eventually struck out on my own. I was doing really well, building a good business. And I was on my way home one night and was rear-ended, had my back broken, and my head rattled pretty good. So wound up kind of homebound. And this was like rehabilitation almost. Mm-hmm. And it kind of bloomed into its own thing from there.
Nice. I was looking at some of your work there, and I'm loving the variety of styles that you have too. And we'll talk about that later on in the show, especially with this brand new book that both you and Austin are creating, or that you have created, called Steel Wool. Flip back to you, Austin. Talk about Steel Wool. Like, what's the concept? What's the pitch? And where can we find it?
Okay, so Steel Wool, it was an idea that me and Vic had kicked back and forth. That it was his idea, kind of like, oh, like this and this, and we just kind of chatted, kicked stuff back and forth, and became this bigger thing. And so Steel Wool follows Ally Skyeater. So she is a sophomore high school. Her dad is in the military, and he's not ever around. And it just so happens that she is the star running back of the football team.
Nice.
Train.
That always happens.
But we're currently launching Kickstarter. We've got 14 days left, and we're like 50% funded.
Nice.
For the first issue.
Good stuff. So, okay, talk about this. I mean, creative collaborations are always fun, and this is for both of you, so you can jump in whenever. This concept sounds great because this is I'm seeing a lot more strong female leads in creator-owned works, which is, to be honest, finally, it's about time that a lot of there's the other gender is or the other sex. Strong female leads are finally being showcased. And so talk about how you guys started working on that and that kind of process.
I guess it kind of starts with my daughter. And this like weird car ride. We were all as a family going over to my wife's father's house, who lives like one development over from us. And there's what they call a green belt in between the two developments. And we're driving past the green belt, and there was like, I don't know, 15 to 20 kids down there, and they were all kind of been, from the distance as we're getting closer, and I'm looking at them, and I look at my wife and I go, "What is that?" And she goes, "I think they're LARPing." And I was like, you know what? That is awesome. And as we got closer, they had like trash can lids and hockey sticks, and they were just being kids and hanging out in the sunshine and LARPing. And I was like, with all the technology and everything that these kids have nowadays, they're hanging out in basically in the woods with trash can lids and hockey sticks and bows and arrows and whatever, and enjoying life. And this was at the beginning of last summer, and I spent pretty much that entire summer hanging out in the park with my daughter and looking at this field and looking at the kids down there, and I was like, it would be really cool to kind of take all of that and put it into a book and slap some superhero stuff into it. And that's kind of where it came from. And Austin and I were working on some other pitch projects, and I pitched it to him a couple of times, and he was kind of like, meh. And I eventually, I don't know if he was sold on it right away, but eventually he grabbed hold of it, and the concept that he came out with beyond what I already had was awesome. I couldn't have been happier.
Nice.
See, you always throw me under the bus there, because you were like, and it's not that I wasn't sold on it. I was scared. Now,
well, exactly. I was scared.
I was scared to write a female lead character. I've even had people since I've launched the campaign say, what do you know what it's like to be a high school girl? And I'm like, well, my last comic was about a rock monster in space, so what the hell do I that's kind of what a writer does, but that's neither here nor there. And I was scared to write it. I'll be 100% honest. I'm like, I don't know if I could get in that mindset. I just hadn't done it before. And when I started writing it, it actually was coming out really, really good. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. I was making her snarky, kind of wisecracking, and it just worked. And then you usually when you have something, when you're excited to get back to work on it. Like I was at work, and I'm like, I'm gonna get home so I can get these pages in.
That's awesome. I mean, and it goes to show you that as as a creative person in general, for both of you to do something like this, to get out of the comfort zone that you're used to, shows that you have something special. And it's usually those that have never delved into topics or delved into characters that they never thought of creating is going to make something that is going to be amazing. So I can't wait to see more.
I totally agree with that. And you know, the more that we delve into it, and the more care that we're taking. What?
Did I freeze?
No, you're good.
Did you freeze? Oh, so the more.
Keep going, Johannes.
Okay, so the more that we delve into it, and the more that like the better I feel like we're handling the characters, and that was one of the things about Austin that he's done with this character is I think that he really handled her well, and I know that's a terrifying thing, you know, trying to speak for a different sex, but honestly, like I picked up the new Batman Rebirth.
Oh yeah.
And I was looking at it just like a couple of days ago, and I was like, you know, I'm kind of mad at this because I got like 3 or 4 issues in, and I just stopped reading it because they had introduced 2 new characters, and I didn't really like the way that they had handled the female role. Up until that point, I don't know if it changed, but it kind of turned me off. I was like, you know, I would rather have seen them do something a little bit different with this.
Well, and especially when, Austin's internet went out.
Oh no.
Yeah. Sorry, just let me know when we're back. I'll re-invite. We'll still keep going.
Okay.
All right, so we'll get Austin back once his internet comes back on. But sorry, you were talking about the new 52 and or rather the Batman Reborn. The question is what in terms of I know what you mean by stopping a story or stopping in the middle of a series and not finishing it. But how did they introduce these characters? Was it more of a here's this character, you know, no real backstory, away we go, or?
They gave some backstory, but it seemed like they introduced 2 new characters. It was Gotham and Gotham Girl, and it was, you know, I think they may have. Let me look at the last page here. Yeah, they introduced the 2 of them at the same time, and they showed their upbringing, and they came from like a you know, the money background kind of thing, and she kind of followed her brother, and then this incident happened where you know, he kind of turned into a bit of a monster, and she just kind of shut down. And I was like, you know, I don't know any girl really that I grew up with. And you know, in high school I had like lots of female friends. I'm like, I don't know any girls that would have reacted in this situation like this. So, and I don't know if her character became stronger after that. I hope it did, but it was just kind of like I don't know that I want to. It just stopped for me there. It was like, okay, I'm done.
Do you figure it's was it the male lead writer in that situation, or the writer in that particular comic, you know, just decided to put out your basic?
I feel like that has been kind of like historically how they've handled the situations with a lot of females. So they're that culture seems to be changing now. Mm-hmm. And I'm hyper aware of it because I'm married to a wonderful woman. I've got a wonderful daughter, and seeing like the toys change that are, you know, the superhero toys that are aimed at girls nowadays, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. I was like, we didn't see this kind of stuff when we were kids, or if you did, it was far and few in between. And my daughter totally latches onto that. And, you know, she's excited to see when I'm working on this book, and she goes, "Oh, that's Ally Sky Eater. She's a football player." And I'm like, "Yeah," you know, and she runs around the house with a cape on, and she's like, "I'm going to save the day," and, you know, I'm like, "Yeah," you know. So, why can't we do that with everything? Like why do the female roles a lot of times have to have that vulnerability? Why can that be? Why can't that be there? Everybody's got vulnerability, but why can't it just be a more of a normal vulnerability, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think it comes back to just the style of what's always worked. Looking back from the comics in the 50s, 60s, 70s, how it's evolved in general, and not necessarily, well, also in art style as well as writing. But I mean, there's only very few series that I can think of that truly put women on the same equal level as men, or a little higher for that matter. And I think Wonder Woman was the initial starting point. I mean, she got better with age in comics, so to speak, as well as Gail Simone writing Batgirl, which was just an incredible series before they stupidly canned her. Like, sorry, that bothered me because I read a couple of issues of it. I'm like, this is really well written. This is actually incredibly done, and I want to read more of it. But when I heard she was like, oh, it's just like, well, you just lost my interest, and I'm your typical male reader that you get for comics.
Right. Yeah, and I don't understand why the companies aren't seeing that. I mean, there's so much more to offer these characters and their audience. I mean, I don't get it. So,
well, cutting back to Steel Wool. Took me a second to remember it. I was going to say.
It's okay. It's okay. It's kind of a weird.
It is weird. Talk about that title, because that's something that's not. It's gnawing at me. It's like, why Steel Wool? What is?
I know, right? Well, here's the thing. We were trying to when we started. When we got to the point where we were ready to launch it, we actually didn't have a name. I wanted to call the book Sky Eater, and Austin's like, that's kind of a weird name, and I had some significance behind it, but I don't think, and I kind of said this to other people, and people were like, it's kind of a weird name, and I was just racing around with things, and I was actually doing the dishes one night. And I was using Steel Wool, and I was like, that's kind of like one of those things. And I got this joke inside of my head, which will pop up later. I don't know if I want to give it off right now, but it's kind of like something that happens to her that winds up sticking.
Okay.
And that's where it comes from, because it's almost kind of a joke on everything that we've been talking about. For me, how I view it, that she's got a strong personality, and there's nothing wrong with that, but some people perceive it as being an issue, so why not just take the glaringly obvious thing and put it out there?
When Austin mentioned the name of the comic to me, I'm like, Steel Wool from the makers of Ajax. It just kind of stuck with me there. It's just like, which is the whole ironic podcast here today. So there we go. Another segue there for you, Austin. Have fun with that. But so yeah, I mean, Steel Wool, in essence, especially for a female character, in interacting with other characters, especially one that's predominantly male, especially in a football scene, could be grating, goes against the grain of what we're used to. And so introducing someone like that, I should say, is a great way to bring light to something that usually isn't showcased.
Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of art, well, after your unfortunate accident and going into falling back to your art profession, and they say you can't fall back on art. Go figure. It's amazing that.
Yeah, no, that's something I heard my entire life growing up, which is kind of funny because I mean I was set up to be an artist. I was a home study student for the majority of high school, and wanted to go to a Kerbert's School of Graphic Design. and that just didn't happen.
Hmm.
There was things that happened in my life, and people saying, that's a bad idea, and I just kind of went along with it. But I continued to do comic strips because I was like, it's to me, for some reason at that time, it seemed like doing a comic strip was more of a viable means of making money and being syndicated and things like that. So for the next couple of years, while I was in the construction industry, I was actually developing a comic strip and refining the artwork and creating the style and everything that went into it. And just about the time that I got to the point where I was ready to pitch it was when I got into the car accident.
Oh.
And when I came out of the accident, I stuttered. I shook really bad. I couldn't remember anything. I still have a hard time remembering names and places, and there's just specific things that don't click right away for me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really weird pregnant pauses when I speak. But so I was at home, and I was hanging out with our newborn baby. And I said to my wife, I was like, I feel like I'm kind of going crazy. Like I'm just like a stay-at-home parent, and that's just like pretty much all I'm doing. I was like, would you mind if I spent like a couple of minutes a day, like, maybe trying to work on doing art stuff? But that didn't work very well because it was very shaky.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually where the digital stuff came in play, was where my wife was like, hey, why don't you do digital art? Which is a concept that I had never really even thought of.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I was able to find a way to not make shaky lines.
And see, technology proves once again that anyone can draw and continue to be creative.
Exactly. And things have gotten a lot better over the past couple of years, but I still have my moments where I can't draw a straight line to save me, even with like all the sensors turned up.
Hold the shift key.
Yeah. Alt Shift Delete.
Yeah, there you go.
Back.
I can't undo anymore. I've gone 99 steps, and it's not.
I've had those moments.
Well, okay. Let's continue on with Steel Wool here.
Okay.
The concept itself is interesting. It's unique. I mean, Austin was mentioning that it was more of a serious story with hints of humor, and that's great to see. But when you're drawing this stuff, and when we were spitballing everything off with Austin there, and coming to a conclusion of here's issue 1, let's bring this to the public. What excited you the most about finally releasing it to the public?
When the art started happening. Actually, no, I take that back. When Austin had done 6 or 8 pages originally, and I was like, yeah, even right after the first 3 pages, and I laughed hysterically at the punchline where the jock's like, hey, why don't you come in the bathroom? And not the bathroom, the locker room. And Allie turns to him and goes, I've already seen all of that, or whatever. And yeah,
that was funny.
And I laughed out loud. And that's something that I don't really do. And I've read a lot of scripts, and I was right from the get-go when I read the first punk rock stuff from him. I was like, this guy's got something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to see him really do this with not space aliens. Like superheroes, and he nailed that, and he just the way that he brought the character out and her personality was great, and I got to the end of the 8 pages, and normally by that far into a script I'm kind of like, there's a lull, and I'm like, I've got to finish this script, I'll put it down or whatever. But I was like, man, where's the rest of this book? I need to read this. And I gave it to my wife, and I was like, read this. And she read it, and she goes, I need to read the rest of the book as well. So, and she's big on writing. I'm an art guy,
mm-hmm.
and she was the one that really introduced me to good writers. So for her to say something like that really, raised my eyebrow as well. And then when we finally did get the script, the finished script, and she read it, she's like, "This is good." She's like, you need to do this."
Nice.
So, and I felt obviously the exact same way. And then I started laying down the artwork, and that was when I was like, "This is, I think we've got something here."
Excuse me. No, I completely understand. I mean, it's great to see creative people just dive into their work, like when Austin was saying, forget work. I want to keep writing. I want to keep doing this. That type of thing. And hearing it from you as well too. It's great to finally see. And in general, I mean, in looking at the Kickstarter campaign and in looking at the video and looking at the artwork as well. And the artwork was something that drew my attention. I've seen hundreds of people's various art styles throughout my years in doing this, and just my own personal collection of webcomics that I've read, and other digital or graphic novels I've read over the years as well too. And good art and different styles of good art draw my attention. Jill Thompson is one person in particular that I've seen. She's done incredible work, from Sandman to Scary Godmother to everything else that she's done. Yannick Paquette, who's done Swamp Thing and Wonder Woman and a few others. Arvell Jones, going back to the 70s and 80s of Iron Fist, that type of stuff. But in looking at how you do your work, introducing watercolor and bringing it back digitally is amazing, because it's something that has not been done in a long time, at least not done in a comic series, at least that I've seen recently. So in talking of that, let's going into the process of it. I don't know if you have anything available to showcase, like how you begin, how you ink, how you color, and how you draw. I mean, that would be great to showcase.
Sure. Let me just dial up a page here and straighten this one out, because it's sideways. Some of my things are blocked.
While you're doing that, I mean, I guess why watercolor would be one question as you're bringing this.
You know what? That's a pretty good question, actually. I have always been kind of a noir guy,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty afraid of doing color. And I was working on another book, and we were trying to transition it into color. One of the issues with doing digital artwork for me is that it is not permanent. So what I found is that I was spending a whole lot of time doing the colors and just not being satisfied with any of it. The programs that I had, they didn't have textures or any of the really rad stuff that I grew up with. Mm-hmm. In comic books, because they were doing different things at that time. Everybody was pushing the boundaries. Everybody was trying to one up everybody else. And everything nowadays, to me, because there is so much digital stuff, kind of seems a little bit flat. So I was really in search of not having that flatness and having something a little bit more unique. Mm-hmm. And it just dawned on me one day. I was like, I wonder if I can print this stuff out and if it would be able to hold watercolor. I found that I was able to seal the pages because the ink that I use from the printer is based. So that proved to have some issues. But once I got past that, I was able to really have a lot of fun with this stuff. And then from there, I'm able to bring it back in, scan it back into the computer, and bring some of that stuff up, or add a little bit of digital highlights or the fun digital dots that I like to do, and yeah.
Good stuff. And we'll see that once
as soon as I get the share figured out here.
Call share screens.
I had it. Yeah, I know the
Not showing up.
No, the button that I used before to do that doesn't seem to be there. Is it this one? Wait, no, maybe I have. Here we go. Yeah, I think that's one. Yep, there we go. Okay,
There we go.
just get that up.
Beautiful.
Cool. So what I'm working on here is I have page. I don't have the page written down at the top. Let's see.
No, that's okay.
It's page 6 of Steel Wall, and so we have essentially she's on her way home here from the last destination that she was at, and we're checking out the really groovy bicycle that she's got, and because I like that, for me the inspiration of this was a lot of the movies that I grew up with. So
Like what?
Like E.T.
Oh, yeah.
And what was the one that Ferris Bueller was in before he was Ferris Bueller?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off? No?
Yeah, but he was in like War Games or something like that. Where
War Games.
Yeah. So it's that kind of feel was something that I was trying to capture, and even those elements of those movies with the government conspiracy and things like that, all that stuff, all that fun stuff that I grew up with, I really wanted to see inside of the book. So I was like, there's shots in there that I'd like to see in these books. So we've got the fun bicycle stuff, the fun home stuff going on.
So in terms of laying it out, it doesn't take too long overall.
No, it's really just the finished artwork. The pages themselves to get to finished line art take about a day to 2 days, and then maybe 2 hours to color.
Nice.
So I mean, it's pretty labor intensive. So it's going to take it's not going to be a monthly book. It'll be a bi-monthly book.
Nice.
Is the idea. And then here's the finished watercolor pages. This is page 1.
Yeah, I love
that. And Allie just throwing some elbows there. Love that.
Hey, it's only illegal if they call a penalty.
Exactly. She didn't spear anybody with her head, so
Yeah, it's no helmet to helmet. I mean, it's not like
yeah.
Oh no, I love the fact that you're the colors in the trees and then the grass, and then the actual uniforms themselves. Just it's subtle enough that it almost looks like digital shading, but when if you know watercolor, you can tell the difference with that, and that's the best part about it. I mean, your shadows are amazing. I love that you can tell you have your noir style is still sort of there, but it's not as predominant, but it's definitely unique, and it's interesting, especially that bottom panel there with the elbow. I mean, I love that dynamic action there that you have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last couple of books that I did were all horror books, so I have that, everything's got that kind of like sinister feel to it, with the walking away with the side eye and whatever. But I did try to dial a lot of the rendering back so that I could let the color be a lot more light, so that you have that. I really wanted to capture that, autumn feel. The days are, they're just, it's, for me, there's something about that time of year where it's such a nice, new kind of, especially when you're going back to school, everything was kind of new and fresh and crisp,
Yeah, the smell of fall in the air type deal. The something about a fresh rain with the leaves and all of that stuff of, summer's over, fall's here, not too long before, cold winters type situation. So enjoy it while you can.
Exactly.
And sloths, really? The sloths? Like,
well, here's the thing, that there's irony in that story as well. We were kind of going, because we wanted to create the town and give, like, I've got a specific vision inside of my head, and I was trying to give that to Austin, and I want him to be in part of the creative process. And I said, name the football team. Let's name the town, let's name the football team, let's name, like, where they hang out. Everything's got to have a name, everything's got to have a feel of, because when you're a kid, you do that. You're like, hey, let's go down to Bear Creek. You go down to Bear Creek because you saw a bear down there or something. So I just kind of wanted to submerge the audience in everything that had to do with the town. And I was like, name the football team, and he came back with something like, I don't know, generic, like the Panthers or something, and I was like, that's not funny. Like he's like some angry moment, he's like, fine, call them the Sloths. It's like, okay, let's do it.
We're playing the Sloths again, man. This is gonna be a slow game. Come on.
Yeah, and what's even better is that their running back is gonna annihilate you, and she's a girl.
Yeah. So there goes your masculinity. Have fun.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Good for you. Gosh, the Sloths. Seriously, that's just like, irony at its best. Love it. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the story, though, it's obviously it's complete. We're finally in the final stages of a type situation.
Yes. Good. We're getting all the art done. The art's kind of been slow going the past 2 weeks because I've been trying to produce as much stuff for the Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. Incentives, because I really wanted to, being a digital artist for so long, there's not a whole lot of stuff out there for people to own of mine, right. Which was another one of the reasons to do the book in watercolor is that there's finished pages that people can own.
Nice.
And that's what artist doesn't want to see their artwork hanging on somebody's walls? That's like, that's the best feeling ever.
Exactly, for sure.
So
we'll talk about.
So yeah, I've been spending a lot of time doing that. Getting the. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. What I was. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry. This is where the delay.
No, go ahead.
It's okay. But talk about the Kickstarter itself there, because it's something that I've done Indiegogo campaigns, and I've had a successful one recently. I find this is sometimes the most stressful situation, because you have such passion for this project. You still need the funds to complete it. Obviously, it's not something that can always be done out of pocket. What type of perks, I guess, are you offering? And I'll look at some of these here while you're thinking, because you're obviously providing digital copies of the book as well as physical copies, and other works as well too, from what I can see.
Okay,
T-shirts and everything.
Right, T-shirts. Let's see. Man, there's so much. There's a bunch of art that I've done over the past 2 years that's there. So I was just kind of like liquidating everything. There's some horror pinups that I've done of. Not that it's really horror, but Herman Munster, mm-hmm. and Grandpa Munster, and there's from the last book that I did, The Untold. There's a couple of black and white pages there that were done in traditional inks, and then a bunch of just fun sketches that I've done, or you can purchase your own sketch. Of your favorite character or whatever it is that you'd be interested in. One of the really cool things that we have that I was impressed by was there's a $15 reward for 300 pages of comic books that Austin's done.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so prolific. It's awesome. I wish I could give away 300 pages of stuff that I've done. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Trust me, when I get there, I will. That's definitely one of my goals.
then that's one of the most unique perks I've seen in a while. Over 300 pages of digital comics, including Punk and Rock, Steel Wool, Headless Hitman, and many more. I mean, if that's not a perk people don't pick up, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with them, because that's just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? Those punk rock books, they have like a crazy following. They're some of my favorite artists. So, some of my favorite indie artists, and myself also, because I had to. And I don't do that. I don't do like fan art for books really, because I'm normally swamped. But when Austin said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing fan art?" I was like, "Are you kidding me?" I had that stuff ready for him like in a day.
It's like, what took you so long to ask me? I was already ready.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a good video. I mean, the steel wool cover itself is definitely unique. This reminds me of the watercolor style that you're doing. Reminds me a lot of the Jessica Jones comic book back in the 90s, I believe. But it was called something else. I just know I remember reading it, and it had this similar style in general of it. It just kind of reminded me the cover did. So
I don't think I've seen that. If to be honest with you, the places where I come from with the color is probably the first run of Ninjak with Joe Quesada. And they had it's I don't know if it's laying. It's normally laying pretty close to me. They had
Alias. That's what it was.
Alias.
Yeah.
Was it Jessica Jones or the?
Yeah. It was the original Pumpkin. Yeah.
Alias. I'll have to look that up. Definitely.
It's well written.
So the Ninjak, they had some serious watercolor artists do the watercolors for the art. Now, I always thought that was really, really pretty awesome, because some of the stuff didn't really line up, and for years I've been looking at it and I'm like, why does that kind of look just like a little bit off? And now that I'm doing it, I'm like, I get it, like I don't know how they did it back then. They I think they would produce the line art on regular Bristol, and then they would transfer that to some sort of clear vellum or something and paint underneath it. I think is how that process used to go, which sounds to me totally nuts. I don't know how. I don't know if there was a light board involved in that or what, but that sounds like a lot of work. But it looked awesome. So that was,
Well, the fact that you're doing this for this particular series is great to see, and I'm glad you're going to continue to do it. But once this is completed and you either move on to issue 2 or you continue on with other projects, how has this evolved you as an artist then, working on this particular book?
Oh my gosh. Well, to answer the first not real question is, this is what I want to do. I like this book so much. I really want to just produce these if possible. I don't know if that's possible right now, but that's the goal, is to just kind of work in my own realm right at the moment and work on this and produce 4 to 6 books a year of this. As far as how this has changed me as an artist, I was thinking about that Friday night, and I was so pumped because I was working on an alternative cover for the book, and I feel kind of like the sky's the limit right at the moment. I don't know where this is going to take my art, but I know that I have a really good feeling about it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I always ask these questions for all the guests that come on the show here, because it's an ongoing documentary I've been creating for 4 or so years with no end in sight. But
that's okay.
But I'll ask these anyhow, because you're an interesting person, and I'm sure people want to know. When it give me a second. It's been a few weeks since I've done a show. Everyone has that one person that kind of inspired them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
Are Are you speaking like artistically or? Oh man, there's been so much. I don't.
It's an open-ended question. Take it how you will.
I think for me, my wife is like a huge inspiration to me because she's got such a work ethic and such a belief in everything that I do. I think the first time that I really, I've been hooked on doing comic books since I was a kid. But when I was real young, I met Kelly Jones, and he had signed the book, and that he was doing at the time, and he spent some time with me, and I thought that was awesome. And I was like, this is such a cool thing to do. I don't know. It's kind of hard to put a finger on everything or the exact moment. I mean, one of the biggest defining moments was the private school that I went to. I was kind of ostracized when I was in second or third grade, and I wound up spending. I told the teacher, I said, I'm just going to stay inside, and she knew that I was into comic books, so she went and got me a stack of comic books at lunchtime one day, brought them back, and gave me a stack of vellum tracing paper, and she said, here, if you're going to be inside, you're going to have to do something. And that evolved into me doing a comic strip in the school newspaper.
That's awesome.
So it's just kind of like I don't know. I want to say all of those people.
Then you can. So there you go. You just did. Everyone, sorry, from a professional standpoint, you had a successful career in family construction, in your own business, and after the accident, you're becoming extremely professional, or you are extremely professional as a comic book artist, as an artist in general, I should say. Do you consider yourself personally successful?
At the moment, I have a goal to where I want to be, and I think that yes and no. I think that I'm still young to this, still new to this whole thing. So I think that I'm right where I need to be right at the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Everyone has to grow at their own pace, and it comes back to, taking the steps you need to improve yourself, to focus on the goals you've set for yourself, and to be able to be flexible enough to move on if those goals aren't necessarily met within whatever timeline you're going for.
Yes.
It's like I've done this before or something. Who knows?
Thanks for cleaning up after me.
It's okay. I'm used to it. How do you deal with failure?
I'm learning to do that. I try to nowadays, especially with everything that's happened, I try to look at it and say, okay, this is either going to fail or it's going to succeed. And if it fails, then I will just keep moving along. It's kind of like Austin asked me the other day, he's like, are you worried about the Kickstarter? And I said, I want the Kickstarter to happen. I want this Kickstarter to go off without any issues and us to just move forward. However, if it doesn't, we'll just put it back up. We'll turn right back around and keep going with it because I believe in this, and and not to down talk it or anything. I think we're doing really good with it, but there's always the possibility that it might fall apart at the end. I don't want it to, and even if it did, I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't stop with this because I think that this is a good book, and I think it needs to be done.
Oh, I agree. And I was talking to Austin in the pre-show about this. I went to Indiegogo for my campaigns, and yes, it's not as quote unquote widely known as Kickstarter. At least you have the flexibility of gaining some of the money from it and not necessarily all of it. If you reach your goal, only 4% gets taken away. If you don't reach your goal on Kickstarter, you get nothing. It's
correct. It's a gamble. It's a terrifying, sweaty gamble.
And with 2 weeks to go, and you're over halfway. So I mean, you're there. It's so close to, you can taste
Yeah,
it.
we've been consistent, and I can taste it and I can see it, and I'm like, I'm worried, but I'm not really worried because I think that you know, I think we're gonna get it,
Mhm.
and I think if we go over a little bit, it's gonna be a little bit. I don't think it's gonna be like the last Kickstarter that I did where it was like, we had like a $4,000 or $5,000 goal and we made it and we went over that. I don't think that it's going to be like that because this is, kind of new territory for both of us, and I think that that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, last question then. The younger generation, obviously, you have a younger generation living with you now, seeing your work and becoming inspired to be an artist herself, possibly.
Oh yeah.
And those that are watch or that have looked at your stuff and that have followed you are becoming inspired as well. As they grow up, as they look to your work and they are inspired to become artists or whatever they'd like to be creatively, how can they inspire the generation that follows them?
Um, that's actually a really fresh question. I went to a Comic-Con yesterday, just to hand out flyers and to be a fan and to meet a couple of the artists that I enjoy watching, and I wanted to get out and buy their stuff, and they were totally rad. They hung out with me. They talked. Chris Mad was awesome, and he and I actually have kind of like the same. We're kind of like in the same point in our lives, and that was really cool. And the other dude, I always say his name wrong, is Chris Falcone of the Savage Quest.
Yeah.
Those guys were rad, and that's kind of the thing we were talking about yesterday amongst ourselves. Was like it was really cool to hang out with them, and them they were really down to earth people, and that was one of the things with with Kelly Jones when I was little, was that to take that time with the younger generation and just to be a decent person and have fun at what you're doing, because we're making comic books. They're supposed to be fun. And that's the whole point. It's supposed to be an escape, I guess.
Yeah.
To some degree. That it's all entertainment. So you're an entertainer. Be an entertainer. Be fun. Have fun and be inspiring.
Good stuff. Which Comic-Con was it?
The ZoloCon, which, more irony, is set in the town that Steel Wool is set in, the town that I grew up in, Warminster, and it was set in the centrifuge where Neil Armstrong and the rest of the original astronauts were spun silly, for lack of better. And I grew up in that town, and it was nuts, man. We had planes, these crazy like military experimental planes flying over the house all the time. We would get like notices in the mail, hey, you need to not be in your house this day because we're flying something weird over it repeatedly. The lights would dim when they fired up the centrifuge. We had no idea the centrifuge was there until they decommissioned the thing, and one of my friends bought it, and he's like, hey, you got to come down here and look at this thing. They left the monkey cages, they left the files, they left the computers. It looked like something out of like Buck Rogers in there, man. It was nuts.
Here's where Neil Armstrong puked on the wall.
Exactly, man. There's just, and going there yesterday, there was so much nostalgia and looking around the town, and I'm hopefully going to post a video about all of it later on this week, but ZoloCon was the place, man. And it was a lot of fun.
Nice. Hey, it's great to have conventions that you can go to visit artists that you've either never seen or that you've been following for a while. And we have a few of those cons up here, and it's ever expanding, it's ever growing. And I'd love to take a year and just travel the country and just go to every convention and just do that. That would be something I'd love to do. So
that is something that I'm looking forward to. That for me, that's kind of like an arrival. I'm like, when I get to a point where I'm making it to like a large majority of cons, and getting to get out and meet people and see people like enjoying my book, Yeah, that's the goal, man.
For me, it would just be to do an en masse interview from East Coast to West Coast. It would just be great.
That sounds pretty rad too, man.
Um, okay, so we have the Kickstarter campaign itself, and
We do.
Well,
What?
Robbie, I'm just saying I have a link to the Kickstarter,
Oh, okay.
which I'll post obviously on, of course, the show notes, and I'll get that promoted as well too on the various social medias. Is there anything else you want to share with those that are watching and listening to this that we haven't probably touched upon?
I don't know. Be awesome. Enjoy your life and enjoy comic books. Read all the time because it's super important.
I can't add anything to that. I agree wholeheartedly. So there you go. Well, I hate to say it. Unfortunately, with Austin's departure, I can't ask him any questions. But
I know that stinks.
well,
He's so much fun.
he is, and I mean, cat butt aside, and all of that other stuff. Nipple slip and cat butt aside. We do miss his presence here on, of course, Two Geeks Talking at tgtmedia.com. And Johannes, you filled in wonderfully as the guest here. So I'm glad to have you on the show. I'd love to have you back. We'll talk more weird stuff in your hometown. We'll talk more comics, and we'll talk hopefully issue 2 of course, Steel Wool for sure.
Oh, we will definitely for sure. And because he's not here, I'm gonna have to say it for him. Check out Hamblin Comics because they're rad. And he's rad.
And what's your website?
You can find me anywhere because I've got a weird name. So just Google Johannes Vick, and any platform that you are interested in, I am probably there.
Okay. Which is Johannes Vick is his last name. Not to be confused with Michael. No relation whatsoever. So.
Oh man, I get that so much too. It's funny.
I'm sure you do. I get Will Sasso all the time. He's like a third cousin or something like that. So it's weird, comedian. But anyhow,
okay.
That ends this episode, of course, of Two Geeks Talking. Thanks, Johannes, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Austin and the cat for appearing earlier in the show. Appreciate that as well. We'll get you back on. We'll try to add in more content for you too, hopefully with issue 2. Of course, check out their Kickstarter, which will be in the show notes down below. And other than that, make sure you subscribe to both iTunes and YouTube on my channel, which is, I believe, TGT Media on both of those. Now, here's the thing with iTunes. I'm finally getting back into the podcast portion of things, which I've neglected seriously for like about 2 years now, so I apologize for that. So subscribe to my iTunes, get the latest interviews like this one so that you can listen to this while you're drawing and while you're doing everything. My Patreon is being completely re-updated because it needs to be done. And, of course, you can find me at tgtmedia.com. You can find me on social media at Kurt Sasso, KurtSasso. If you spell it with a C, then we'll never be friends. So it is what it is. I'm trying to communicate with you as well, too. So, and then finally, of course, iTunes, search for Two Geeks Talking or TGT Media. And you like that? And other than that, I'm a pretty nice guy to get a hold of. So, hey, kurtsasso@gmail.com. That was the final thing I wanted to talk about. Anyhow, thanks everyone listening and watching. Thanks, Johannes. Thanks, Austin. Go check out...
Thank you, Kurt.
No problem, man. Go check out Steel Wool issue 1 with the Mighty Sloths and the amazing characters that they have on the show as well. Thanks again. And tune in next week for another great episode of Two Geeks Talking with myself and whoever I have on the show. It could